in search of recommendations.
I am going to recommend the horror film Mr. Vampire from 1985, which is a Hong Kong fantasy kung fu flick. It was followed by a bunch of sequels and spin-offs, but the original Mr. Vampire I do recommend. Comedy horror at its best, great cast, great production values, just a lot of fun in general, and I can't recommend this enough. It was on Channel 4 in the day, and it was hosted by Jonathan Ross in a Chinese Ghost Story season.
Patrick here, have Cheetah Will View. The movie that we're going to be talking about is Christy. Comes out in 2015. It was directed by Oliver Blackburn, and it stars Haley Bennett and Ashley Greene. It is about groups of people going around the country and killing innocent women and calling them Christy. And there's some religious overtones inside of this as well. This is a banger of a movie. Haley Bennett is a heroine, and she has to fight for her life when she is stranded at a college and facing off against these killers. It's very suspenseful, very exciting, and one we recommend. Christy.
Hey Bayek, it's me Ian, and this is the film that I recommend. It is The Curse of Frankenstein from 1957. It stars Peter Cushing as the Baron, and Christopher Lee plays the monster. It's brilliant, it's so atmospheric, and it's important because this is where the whole cycle of Hammer Gothic horror began. Fantastic film it is, highly recommended, and it was influential to other directors as well. Talk about the Hammer Gothic films, people like Scorsese, Wes Craven, John Carpenter, all mention Hammer, and why not? Because these are great, colourful, vibrant, fantastic films. Love them, really do.
I am going to recommend The Outwaters. It's an independent found footage film from writer, director, creator Robbie Banfitch. It takes place in the Mojave Desert. A group of friends go out to film a music video and chaos ensues. I recommend that one because it encapsulates all kinds of different levels of fear. And it's just complete insanity. It's very confusing. It's kind of mind melting. It really makes you question a lot of things and has a great rewatch value because of that. It's something that I've watched probably 3 or 4 times just to try and kind of get a grasp of exactly what's going on. And it leaves a lot of questions unanswered, but in a good way. It's a fantastic independent film, and I highly recommend it for its entertainment value, its production value, the cinematography, everything about it, in my opinion, is absolutely amazing.
Everyone that knows me knows for a fact that my favorite movie of all time is Halloween 1978. To me, this is the greatest movie of all time and a perfect movie. Some people would nitpick the whole knife through the body and door thing, but to me, I simply adore this flick indeed. A movie that I've seen quite a number of times, probably more than I really should have, and it's a personal guilty pleasure, is Howling 2, your sister is a werewolf, or as it is known in other regions, Howling 2, Serbo Werewolf Bitch. And has Christopher Lee, Rev Brown, Sybil Danning. It's a really good movie, despite what some people might lead you to believe. A movie that I feel doesn't get talked about as much as it probably should is Decoys. Now, truth be told, this is a little bit like a Species knockoff, but it's a movie about sexy alien chicks that want to mate. Who doesn't love that?
I have chosen The Wolf of Snow Hollow. Now, this is a great horror movie. It is about a small town that is seemingly beset by a horrific werewolf. Now, this is one of Jim Cummins' movies. It was both written and produced by him, and he stars in it. He is a deputy sheriff, John Marshall, who is he's a divorced guy. He's also a recovering alcoholic. And the other thing about this movie is that it was Robert Forster's last movie. It was filmed, it was the last thing he filmed, and it was released shortly before his death. It's a great film. It's got a lot of twists and turns in it. He has a lot of private struggles that he has to deal with. And his deputy, who is played by Riki Lindham, she's part of the Garfunkel and Oates group, plays a great character, a very strong female character, and it's a really great movie. It's got some good effects, a lot of practical stuff, and I definitely tell you should pick it up. I have a copy that I picked up from eBay. I don't believe it is streaming for free right now, but you can rent it on most of the streaming platforms for about $6. Personally, I say rent it. It's a great film. So once again, this is Jamie Ray with Bay 5 from Pen Podcast. Thanks so much.
The movie that I would like to recommend that you see is Piggy. It came out in 2022. It is available on Amazon Prime, and it is in Spanish, but you can watch it subtitled or dubbed. I actually watched it dubbed the first time, and the dubbing wasn't too bad, but I do prefer subtitles. This is such a good movie because the horror isn't just, the blood and guts that eventually come. The horror is how people are treated, and it takes place in Spain, not where my mom is from, but to me it felt very familiar, and to me the plot felt very familiar. As you know, I'm a huge fan of the Saw series. Now, Saw movies, I will say that they are not what you would call your typical horror movie, because the Saw movies, they're part of a big story. And if you don't know the whole big story, it can be very hard to jump into them. But they recently released a movie, I think it was Saw X, and this one is a prequel, and it takes place in Mexico. And I just really enjoyed this one. It had a great story. Once again, remember, Jigsaw is the bad guy. We're not supposed to be rooting for Jigsaw or anything here, but sometimes he makes a good point. So, the story of what happened at this encampment, this camp in China during World War II, when Japanese scientists were experimenting on people, and oh boy, it is a lot. So if you want hardcore, like horrific, humanity is the demon of the universe, then that one I recommend. and Piggy and Saw X.
This is Jason from the Terror Express podcast and author of the upcoming trilogy of novels entitled Bitch. And I am here to recommend to you some of my favorite horror films. And spoiler alert, most of these are going to be creature features or slasher films, with the exception of a couple possession movies. I think those are my three favorite subgenres. I'm very prone to recommending films from the 80s. I will try and not stay in that box. Poltergeist is one of my all-time favorite films. Scared the crap out of me as a kid. And the visual effects in that movie, even by today's standards, excel what we can do now. I think even with the CGI, I'm not a big fan of CGI. I don't mind it in some cases, like An Interview with the Vampire, which is another great movie. To use it as visual effects, I'm totally okay with it, but for like blood and gore, I don't like the way it looks. So I'm going to stick mostly here, I think, with practical effects for you. Slumber Party Massacre from the 80s is a fantastic film. Scare the crap out of me. Practical effects, great cast, strong characters, great writing, very comical as well. I like movies like Prom Night with Jamie Lee Curtis, very suspenseful. The music, the cast, again, I just love everything about it. I remember watching that one when I was a kid, and it scared me, and it affected me, and it stayed with me. Other movies that have done that are also amongst some of my favorites today from the 80s. The Fog, The Howling, Friday the 13th, the original. Now I have to tell you, Friday the 13th Part 3 is my all-time favorite film, not just in the franchise, but ever. Part 5 is my favorite in the franchise, A New Beginning. Evil Dead is a great film. Again, it was raw, it was visceral, it was a great student film that really flipped the entire genre on its head and set the precedents for the entire future of horror films, especially in possession. I love the 2013 remake of Evil Dead. I thought that was brilliant. Fede Alvarez, who directed that, was absolutely fantastic. Dr. Sleep was a great movie. It's a sequel to The Shining, directed by Michael Flanagan. He's one of my favorite current directors. I think what he does with the characters and the direction of the film is wonderful. Suspense films, The Birds, Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds, Psycho, that's a classic. Return of the Living Dead from the 80s with Tom Matthews and Suzanne Snyder is a great film. And I'm pulling this off my head because I watch so many horror films, it's kind of easy for me to just recommend some that have been fun, and most of these are films that are unforgettable for one reason or another, whether it's suspense or if it's the practical makeup effects. Like I said, I love that. Now, there's an underrated and kind of unknown horror gem that I found back in the early 2000s in a video store called Malevolent. It's a film written and directed by Stephen Mena, and it was a perfect blend of Silence of the Lambs, Friday the 13th, and Halloween. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend finding it. There is a sequel called Bereavement, written and directed by Stephen Mena, and they were very brilliantly done. And there's so many other movies like The Blob, the remake of The Blob. Carrie had a great remake. The Crazies was a fun one. That one was, I believe, 2014-ish, and it had Danielle Panabaker in that one. That one set the bar for suspense and shock value. I also love shock value. I guess I can't leave out Hocus Pocus. Obviously, as you can see, I'm a huge Hocus Pocus fan too, so I gotta throw a couple kids titles out there, I suppose. So yeah, those are some of my favorite movies that I recommend. The Mutilator, great practical effects, and it's got a shocking death scene that even today, 40 years later, did you see The Mutilator? Do you remember what happened with Sue? I like that one so much. I've actually interviewed Buddy Cooper, who wrote and directed that, and I do have some screen-worn costumes that were worn in the film. That's how much I love that movie. It's one of my all-time favorites. Here's a quick add-on. My Bloody Valentine is one of my all-time favorites too, so I would be really disappointed in myself if I didn't at least say My Bloody Valentine. The original unrated version. You gotta see that one.
it's CBV, Chris Van Vliet. I feel like I'm being put on the spot. Like, if this isn't a great horror movie, you're going to be like, oh man, CBV just doesn't have good taste in movies. So I recently did the junket, I guess it's the end of last year, for Saw X, and I'm a huge fan of the Saw franchise. So if you haven't seen any of the Saw movies, of course, start with number 1. But Saw X really impressed me, and I think Tobin Bell showed like how great he is as a performer. So that is one of my picks. I also love Scream. So if we're going way back, 1996, right? Scream's one of my favorites because it's a little bit funny, it's a little bit drama, it's quite a bit horror, but it like totally put a different twist on how horror movies would be done. So that's another one. I don't know if this is technically a horror movie, but Ex Machina is one of my favorite movies of the last 20 years. And the last 15 minutes or so of that movie, my goodness, that'll make you be thinking. That'll have you be thinking for a long time. So there's 3 for you. Well, technically 4 with Saw and Saw X. But there's 4 for you. I hope you enjoy those.
Gangrel the Vampire Warrior. Now you're asking me, can I recommend, or you were wondering if I could recommend a horror film for you to watch. Well, I could easily say The After Dark, which I'm in, but I'm not going to do that to you. So a horror film, I'm going to go with vampires, being I'm a vampire. I'm not the Lost Boys, but I'm going to go with Near Dark. It's one of my favorite vampire movies. Check it out. Near Dark. Or if you want something foreign with a little what do you call those subtitles in it? It might be a French film, I think. I can't remember when I watched it. It was a while ago, but it was called High Tensions. So check out Near Dark and High Tensions.
Ahoy there, mates. It's Captain Adam of Captain Adam's VHS Pirate Ship. Today, I've been tasked with recommending a horror movie, and while I am going to do so, I gotta tell you, I was pretty perplexed by this. Trying to think of one horror movie that I could recommend to somebody was a pretty hard deal. It's an absolutely loaded genre of film, and trying to think of one movie to recommend to somebody took a while. But after racking my brain and doing some soul searching, I decided on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which you might think is a pretty common choice because it is one of the big archetypes in the horror movie genre. But, like my nose, I simply had to pick it because not only is it my favorite horror movie, but also one of my favorite films of all time in general. To me, it's a very important film and was a game changer. Released in theaters October 11th, 1974, this film would go on to be one of the major contributing factors that would revitalize the horror movie franchise, and the world would never look at chainsaws the same way again. Even though, surprisingly, chainsaws aren't in this film all that much. And the film's title, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is a little misleading, especially when you consider all the marketing and hype that's always surrounded this film. And the general perception of this film has always been that of a butchering bloodbath with limbs flying left and right. So if you go into this movie thinking it's going to be that, well, you might be disappointed or you might be relieved. Because, well, and not to spoil it for you, that never really happens. And the interesting part is, it doesn't have to. This movie has all kinds of ways to scare you. Ways that you wouldn't think a film like this would utilize. Because on its face, you think this film relies on gore to get its point across, but really, there's not that much gore in it. Certainly not as much as I had expected, and I was surprised to find out that this is more of a psychological thriller than it is a horror movie. Now, where you draw the line on those two different film genres is a matter of opinion, but this film definitely makes you feel uneasy from the start. It was made in such a way that you, the viewer, are constantly on edge. You're always waiting for something terrible to happen, and when it's all said and done, you are extremely relieved. And you're also very satisfied because it is a fulfilling movie and just extremely well done. The pacing is excellent and you're never bored. You're too busy with a major case of the heebie-jeebies. This film always reminded me of the classic golden era horror movies wherein you're scared of something you never actually see. The horror is very subtle, and this film, much like the golden era horror movies, doesn't rely on gore to get its point across. Gore is hardly a major part of the arsenal of this film, and really it doesn't need it. It does such a good job of being the embodiment of terror that you're already scared before you even see it. In fact, if someone's trying to get into horror movies but doesn't really like blood and gore, they might want to start with this one, because all in all, it's a nice introduction to the horror movie genre. It's a horror movie that's very enjoyable and accessible without being intimidating and overbearing. It's just a good old-fashioned scary movie that certainly makes you look twice at roadside barbecue stands. It's a tremendously important film that changed the horror movie landscape and gave pop culture another movie monster with Leatherface. And it taught everyone how head cheese was made. Again, you might think that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an extremely common film for me to recommend, but you'd be surprised, as I always am, how many people have yet to see this film. Or at least that's how it is for me, because I've talked to a lot of people who say they've never watched this movie. And though they'll never admit it, I know it's because they're too afraid to do so. Because it's a movie that makes you scared before you even see it. So, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is my horror movie recommendation. This has been Captain Adam of Captain Adam's VHS Pirate Ship. Take care out there, and I'll see you on the 7 Seas.
What's up, fiends? I'm Alucard, and my quickie recommendation for Mr. Pugwall is 1977's The Sentinel. From director Michael Winner, the all-star cast features Christina Rains, Chris Sarandon, Martin Balsam, John Carradine, Jose Ferrer, Ava Gardner, Burgess Meredith, Beverly D'Angelo, Jeff Goldblum, Tom Berenger, Christopher Walken, and Eli Wallach. Wow, what a cast. The film tells the story of a beautiful model renting an apartment in a gloomy New York brownstone. Little does she know, it's a gateway to hell. This movie is creepy as all get out. I get shivers every time I watch it, and I've watched it a few times. The performances are phenomenal, and the makeup effects are done by the legendary Dick Smith. You know you can't go wrong with that. I cannot recommend this one enough. What's up, fiends? I'm Alucard, and my quickie recommendation for Mr. Pugwall is 1973's Torso, from director Sergio Martino. It stars Susie Kendall and Tina Oman. It is a proto-slasher giallo that tells the story of 4 gorgeous college ladies on vacation, crossing paths with a lecherous murderer. It focuses on sex, violence, and tension, especially in the final act. It ramps up beautifully to the climax. You can find it on physical media and on streaming platforms, so check it out. Did I mention there's tons of nudity and gore? What more could you want?
Alright, so what I recommend is probably easily in my top 5 horrors of all time, and that is Scream from 1996. I mean, that movie just kind of flipped the whole horror genre upside down when it came out. I mean, I distinctly remember being amazed how this horror movie could just literally call out other horror movies. You know, like Friday the 13th and Halloween, you know, you didn't really know where it was going to take you. There were certain rules you had to follow to survive, and of course the big twist at the end with who's the killer, or killers. And aside from the great concept, overall I think the cast is just fantastic. I mean, who have you got? You got Neve Campbell, Matthew Lillard, Courtney Cox, and Drew Barrymore. And of course you can't really not mention the horror legend himself, who is Wes Craven. I mean, from The Last House on the Left to The Hills Have Eyes, A Nightmare on Elm Street, of course, and in my opinion, I think he just outdid himself once again with this film, Scream, in 1996. So that's my recommendation. I hope you agree with me. If not, I'll be happy to argue with you.
So Matt at Pugwall316 has asked me to do a video on a horror film I can recommend. So pretty quickly I came up with Bruce Campbell fighting demons.
You know his movies.
Maniac Cop? Moonwarp?
You know his name.
Yep. It's My Name is Bruce.
My Name is Bruce.
Directed by Campbell as well. Filmed on his ranch, I think it is.
Bruce Campbell is the greatest actor of his generation.
Bruce Campbell.
Hey, I know that guy. Unlike most action stars, I can speak, what's the word, English.
So it had Ted Raimi, who's also in Evil Dead 2.
Ted Raimi and Ted Raimi.
And a few other faces from the horror community. As you can see, this has a lot of extras. But see, it's a fun ride with Bruce's charm on full blast.
He loves his fans.
Give me your autograph. Ever see Rawhide? Yeah. Well, then you gotta keep them doggies rolling.
So basically, it's a story about a demon escapes in a small town and causes havoc. And a young kid who's a Bruce Campbell fan calls Bruce up.
And
Mr. Campbell, we need your help.
when your town's in trouble,
A group of teenagers unwittingly unleashed Quan Di, the Chinese god of war and protector of the dead.
Thinking he's like character Ash.
And unless you help us stop him, he will kill every one of us.
But of course, this version of Bruce Campbell is a little dickhead and thinks it's all fake. Until deaths start happening, and then he cowardly runs away.
Retreat!
they call
A rumble from below. It's only a 15, so don't expect any gore or anything, but it's very funny. I think Sam Raimi has 3 characters in this. And of course, Bruce Campbell's trying to get his rocks off with the boy's mother.
Grab your women.
Let's let him move that hand.
Sorry about that.
All played for laughs, of course. But not many people have seen this and probably looked at the reviews. But a legend in his own lifetime, Bruce Campbell is the ultimate cult actor. Not really a review of the film, more the actor himself. But he is playing himself up to the T in this one. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Here, end of the lesson.
You need someone who can take on a heinous monster and stop him in his tracks.
For the job.
That would be me.
Hey, so I recommend Hellraiser from 1987, Clive Barker's Hellraiser. I just watched it again last week, and every single time it blows me away. The storytelling, the atmosphere, the way it's lit, the gore, the acting is fantastic. I just absolutely love it. I recommend any horror fan that has not seen Hellraiser, which if you haven't, then I don't know. Are you a horror fan? Take a journey with the Cenobites, you know, or they'll tear your soul apart. Please see Hellraiser. I'd like to recommend a movie that I just discovered last year. It's a little known horror film called The Baby from 1973. So it's 51 years old. I don't even know how I came across this movie, but the twists and turns in this movie completely blew my friends and I away. I mean, if you're not sitting up at the edge of your couch or chair in the last 10 minutes of this film, we were just in shock of how we didn't see it coming, the twist. I know I keep talking about twist. Now you're going to be looking for the twist if you see this movie. But The Baby, it's about a social worker who is checking in on a family who has a grown man as a baby who he doesn't speak. He just makes baby noises. They keep him in a crib. They keep him from learning how to walk. And yeah, the mother's psychotic, and as well as his 2 sisters. And I mean, that's all I'm gonna say. You just have to see this movie, The Baby. All right, go look for it. Highly recommended. I've been recently re-watching the Puppet Master franchise. Charles Band started the Puppet Master franchise in 1989 with the first one, but I want to recommend Puppet Master 3, which, as a fan of the Puppet Master franchise and a lot of other fans, Puppet Master 3 is the peak best Puppet Master movie. It takes place in Nazi Germany, where you see Andre Toulon, the Puppet Master, his backstory, and him dealing with the Nazis. It's the best one. It's the best well-made. It's fun. It goes by really quick. And as far as like low-budget horror, direct-to-video horror movies, it's just a blast. I absolutely love it. Yeah, so since I started watching the Puppet Master movies, I'm going to keep on going and rewatch all 15 Puppet Master movies. That's including a remake and a couple of spin-off tales of Puppet Masters. I think there's Blade and Dr. Death recent is the last one that they just made. But yeah, I'm a big Full Moon guy. And if you're going to watch a Full Moon movie, start with Puppet Master 3. If it's your cup of tea, go look for others. I also recommend the Subspecies movies. Very gothic, very atmospheric, and just bizarre vampire kind of storytelling. All right, that's it. Take care.
So the film I'm going to recommend was a recommendation to me back in 1991. We used to have a local Sunday market here in the town of Wigan back in the day, and on that market on a Sunday there was a gentleman that used to sell ex-rental VHS, and I was sort of not sick and tired but was looking for something a little bit different than the mainstream horror at the time. So yeah, I'm a big Friday the 13th fan. I liked all the other stuff that was out at that particular time. The general run-of-the-mill stuff was cool, but I was looking for something a little bit different, and this gentleman recommended this film to me, and it stuck with me forever, and it is Dario Argento's Creepers. This blew my tiny young teenage mind. The score and the soundtrack to this film were phenomenal. I'm a big heavy metal fan. I was a huge heavy metal fan when I was younger, and when I first started watching this film and I realised the soundtrack in this was by Iron Maiden and Motorhead and other various artists including Goblin, I was hooked straight away. And adding to that, Jennifer Connelly and Donald Pleasance, who I never knew had done anything like this before seeing this film. I was mesmerised by it, and this film did a lot for me. It opened a lot of other doors into Italian genre film, into Italian exploitation films, whether it was horror or sci-fi or action films. I think this was the film that cemented the Italian exploitation films for me personally at a younger age, and that's what still makes me go back to them now. If you've never seen Creepers, aka Phenomena, I highly recommend it. It's a great watch with a fantastic cast and a brilliant score. You can't go wrong with it. G'day, and just doing a quick video recommendation for my mate Matt over at Pugwall 316, and the movie that I am choosing is Wreck. Now, if you have not seen this one, you are missing out. This is a Spanish found footage film that is absolutely balls to the wall, batshit crazy. It's intense, it's thrilling, it's scary. The movie starts off, we're introduced to Angela, played by the stunning Manuela Velasco, and she's following a group of firefighters as they go about their nightly routine, hoping for something interesting to happen. And boy, does she get that. This movie, like I said,
It's batshit crazy. It's intense. It is set in a building, a narrow building, so there is not much room to move around. The intensity that comes from these characters throughout, the creatures, and that's the best way I can describe them without giving it away. It is a infection of sorts. It turns them into ravenous creatures. They are still human looking, but they are vicious. They are chilling. That's all I can say. Definitely recommend. If you have not seen Wreck, you get a hold of it and check it out. There are 3 sequels to it. You have Wreck 2, the follow-up, which is great. Wreck 3, Genesis, which is a prequel, still good. And then Wreck 4, Apocalypse. But if you are not a fan of subtitles, you can always check out the American remake, Quarantine, with Jennifer Carpenter. Solid remake, gets a lot of crap because it's a remake, but it's pretty much scene for scene in English, and Jennifer Carpenter is fantastic as Angela Vidal. There you go, that is my recommendation, Wreck and Quarantine. Hey, I'm back with a video recommendation for Matt over at Pugwall316, and the recommendation I've got is one that does not get spoken about enough, but it is a fantastic little film. It's called Pontypool. Now this has Steve McCarthy in it as a radio DJ, a shock jock who is taken off his big city area and sent to a remote town. And as he is playing his morning routine, he is giving the news, he is talking. Strange things start happening with the people around the town of Pontypool. I think that's the name of the town. I'm not sure, but it's a weird title and it stands out. This zombie-like virus is spread through the human or the voice, through English, through talking, which makes it really hard. And you can imagine, you can put yourself in that situation. Like, how do you communicate? How do we communicate as, movie reviewers if we can't talk? Well, they solve that problem. And this is a very intense, again, it's set in a very confined area. You don't go too far out of this radio station. It gives you that claustrophobic feel. So if you're into those kind of horrors, if you're into smart, well-written, well-acted films, I definitely recommend you check out Pontypool. The movie I'm recommending is one of my all-time favorite John Carpenter films. Now, a lot of people go, oh, John Carpenter, it's going to be Halloween, right? It's going to be Big Trouble in Little China. No. Prince of Darkness. This one is my favorite. Well, actually, this and In the Mouth of Madness tied first for my favorite John Carpenter films. This film has a very creepy atmosphere all throughout, from the beginning all the way through to the end. If you can get over the main actor's porn star mustache, this is a wild ride. It has a fantastic cast. You've got Donald Pleasance, you've got Alice Cooper's in this one. It's amazing. Like the sound, the soundtrack as well. All through it, there's an eerie vibe through it, and that's the best way to describe it. This film just oozes creepiness. And there's nothing that's like this film that I've seen that has that same effect. And it just makes you feel like on edge the entire movie, like something is coming. And the way it ties in the time travel aspect of it, which is interesting, but the religious time travel, the horror, the devil, all that stuff is fantastic. Great special effects, great cast, fantastic movie. If you haven't seen Prince of Darkness, I definitely recommend you check it out. Thanks for watching.
Hello, this is horror writer, director Brandon Scullion here to tell you about one of my favorite horror films that not a lot of people have heard about. Grabbing it off the shelf right here. It's a film called Phase 4, directed by a gentleman named Saul Bass, who you might know as the graphic designer for films like The Shining, and he worked with Alfred Hitchcock on Psycho and North by Northwest, doing a lot of graphics and stuff for his films. But this is the only film Saul has ever directed, and I know I'm already going over the 30 seconds. You gotta check it out. It's about ants, it's got science, it's shot really weird, reminiscent of a Jodorowsky film in terms of surreal imagery and stuff like that. Highly recommend it. Please check it out. Yeah, there you go.
Hey there everyone, and how you doing today? And welcome to something a little different. It was requested by Pugwall316 that he wanted some of, well, my favorite horror movies that slay. I'm a very simple man when it comes to horror movies. I do love my horror movies. I've seen thousands of them, if not more. Trust me, I've seen a lot, and if you know me, you would know. Not kidding. Well, my favorite ones will always be stuff with killer clowns, as you can see. Pennywise, Art the Clown. I'll never forget the time that I fell in love with Art the Clown. I was just flipping through one night, trying to find a new movie to watch on Netflix, and I came across Terrifier. And I was like, hey man, it's a killer clown that I'd never seen before. Let's check it out. And well, the rest is history, because I was like, at first I was like, this is pretty cool, whatever, but that one scene where he's having her upside down with the freaking hacksaw, it was just amazing. That was chef kiss. Another amazing movie was Friday the 13th, the remake. I love that, especially the beginning scene. It's so cool how he has the dude hanging above the fire. And then he runs over, hits him, the way he's killing them all. Going through it was just, I really like scenes when it comes to horror movies. I don't really, I love the whole movie, but it's like scenes that I remember the most. Like The Hills Have Eyes, that's just disturbing. I mean, it has like everything you could think of in that movie, from suicide to crap to even worse stuff. I mean, it's a crazy movie. Another one that I don't know if you'd consider it horror or not is A Clockwork Orange. I really like that. That one was really cool. I remember watching that as a kid and really got me into Stanley Kubrick. I mean, of course, Pennywise. Pennywise will always be the greatest of all time for horror, especially because when I was a young kid, probably I want to say 11 or 12, and my sister was younger than me, and we snuck and were watching it, the Tim Curry version. And oh my god, dude, that scared the crap out of me. It took me years and years and years before I went around the gutters, walking around outside. And I remember that the place that we were living, the toilet and the faucet and stuff made the same noises, so my sister wouldn't go to the bathroom by herself. Someone always had to be in there with her. And dude, that was a scary movie. I remember, it was back in the day. I had a Game Boy, and I think it was like Super Nintendo or regular Nintendo or whatever. I remember hiding behind the little Game Boy strategy guide saying, oh my god, but still watching as it's going on.
The movie I want to talk about is The Stone Tape, a 1972 made-for-television film by the BBC and broadcast on the 25th of December. That's right, Christmas Day. Why? Because it's a ghost story. Well, a quasi-scientific ghost story. It was written by Nigel Neal, famous for Quatermass, and in some ways it's a Quatermass plot, because a group of scientists find themselves in a very old mansion, and they discover that the stones, the ancient stones, have somehow recorded or have embedded in them the memory of some sort of trauma. Now, they get excited by this, not because they found a ghost. Oh no. They get excited because of the idea that something tiny like this could record a film. You'd no longer need film stock or magnetic tape. It could all be put into a memory stick. Well, of course, they don't call it that. But it is way ahead of its time. And they also come up with the idea that what the ghost is inside your head. They're unable to record it, but it does exist inside your head in terms of a virtual reality. No more need for a TV screen or even a cinema. It all happens up here. So, what we have is the idea in the story of the imprint ghost, or the echo ghost. Now, it became known as the stone tape theory But actually it's an idea that goes back to 1882 and a story by Margaret Oliphant called The Open Door, where she writes, a scene like that might impress itself somehow upon the hidden heart of nature. I won't go into the details of that story, but essentially it's the same idea of an echo ghost reliving some sort of trauma event. So, why recommend the film? The performances are great, but really it's an ensemble piece, because Nigel Neal is brilliant at taking characters, giving them only one line and making them very real. The dialogue overlaps, there's a lot of loose exchanges and laughter, and it's very improvisational, very believable. And the more credible the situation and the characters, the more believable and credible will be the ghost. I won't tell you too much about what happens in the end, that would spoil it. But let's just say it's one of those rare ghost stories where the one who is haunted becomes eventually the haunter.
How's it going, everyone? Horror Cat Dad here. I just wanted to give some of my recommendations. For one, I had to start with, of course, one of my favorites and the one that got me into horror, Creature from the Black Lagoon. This was the first one I ever saw from the Universal Monsters, and this was the first one that got me into horror. So, another recommendation is George Romero's classic, Night of the Living Dead. Absolutely love this film to this day. It's still my favorite, along with the original Dawn of the Dead. Just this one is, yeah, by far is my favorite horror movie of all time. Up next, I'm sure this is going to be on a lot of people's list, but John Carpenter's The Thing. Absolutely love this movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. The paranoia in it, the creature effects as well, done beautifully by Rob Bottin. It's one of those films that I can go back to and watch over and over again. Up next, I also recommend Audition by Takashi Miike. This one is a slow burn, really great film. Just up until the end where everything just goes sour. Great movie. If you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. Up next, a slasher from the 90s, Brain Scan. Absolutely love this film. Edward Furlong, I've loved it ever since I saw it. It's just great. Trickster is awesome. Edward Furlong's great in it. Just the fact of a video game being interactive and kind of like hypnotizing you, or I guess possessing you to go and do bad things. You haven't seen it, definitely check it out. It's definitely a good movie. Up next, another one of my favorites, the original Warlock. Warlock and Warlock 2. Warlock 3 doesn't exist to me, but the original Warlock is definitely still my favorite. Warlock 2 is a little bit more over the top, a little bit more campy, but Julian Sands kills it in both films, especially this original one with Richard E. Grant and stuff like that. Fish Out of Water story. Definitely check it out if you haven't. I highly recommend this one. And finally, my favorite full moon feature film, Subspecies. Absolutely love the series. 1, 2, and 3, definitely my favorites. Part 5 is really good as well. But yeah, definitely check out this series. It's one of my favorites. Great villain, Radu, the main vampire in this. If you haven't checked it out, I'd highly recommend this series, especially checking out 1, 2, and 3, and especially 5, the prequel. It's really good. And there is a spin-off, Vampire Journals, but yeah, definitely the first 3, definitely highly recommend seeing the first 3. And it's a great full moon series. I mean, it's shot in Romania for the first 3, and it shows, and I highly recommend it.
How's it going, man? I just watched a horror film, actually. So my recommendation is a movie called Haunt. It's about a group of friends. It's on Halloween, and they discover a haunted house, basically on steroids. I'm not going to say anything else, but enjoy. It's pretty full on. There's a bit of gore. So I had a couple of friends that didn't enjoy that part, but I don't really care because I love like the Saw movies and stuff like that, and I didn't think it was as gory as that, but I think surprisingly it was pretty good. Haunt on Netflix. Cheers, check it out.
Hey, it's Domenick from the Domenick Nati Show. I've been asked to give you a horror film that I recommend you watching. Well, you probably already know this. I think you should go see The Watchers tomorrow in theaters. Check out The Watchers. Or you could watch another film on Amazon Prime called One Missed Call. It's the absolute worst horror film I've ever seen. It's your choice. You want to see a good one or a bad one? Those are my recommendations.
So a really fun slasher movie from the late 80s that I'd love to recommend is American Gothic. It's about a group of friends who hop on a plane and they're headed on a vacation, and the plane has some problems, so they have to land on this remote island in the middle of nowhere. And so while they're working on trying to fix up the plane, the group of friends kind of starts exploring the island, and they run into the house of Ma and Pa, who are played by Yvonne DiCarlo and Rod Steiger. And they also have 3 really wacky children who are in their 50s who act like they're teenagers. And the group ends up kind of getting knocked off one by one by this group of crazy kids. And Ma and Pa, of course, have a great reason for why their kids can do all this stuff. But it's really just a fun slasher movie, and if you haven't seen it, you definitely want to check this one out. American Gothic. It's got some great gore scenes and also some really cool inventive kills. So yeah, check this one out, and it's a whole lot of fun.
In association with Pugwall 316.
To where? To some island. An island without a name. An island not on the chart. Dr. Morrow's Island, and it stinks all over the whole South Sea.
The Island of Lost Souls, based on the novel by H.G. Wells, 1932, starring Bela Lugosi. Upon release, it was banned in 12 countries. Theatergoers were so disturbed, they were vomiting. A critic in England described it as being against nature.
What is the law? Not to eat meat. That is the law. Are we not men? This is the house of
Horror recommendation? Easy one. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. The original and still the best, by a country mile. Forget all the sequels and the prequels. Not the goriest film in the world, but it's got Toby Hooper on form, Gunnar Hansen, Marilyn Burns. What more do you want? Family of cannibals living in the middle of nowhere, broken down vans, young students. It's just everything you'd want. I mean, if you look at the whole grindhouse genre that we've got today, this is where it began. My first exposure to Texas was, well, I was probably far too young to be honest. Early 80s, height of the home video boom. Probably shouldn't have really seen it at my age, but we had a video guy that ran the shop, and he was a bit like a pusher. You'd go in asking for ET and you'd come out with Cannibal Holocaust. Throughout the years, you know, I've tried to revisit the film in different formats. I've probably got, you know, Blu-rays, DVDs, videos, everything. But I've got to say, nothing can beat watching it on a good old-fashioned video. We had it on Betamax, so you can imagine I don't have that anymore. But if you ever get the chance to see it, either A, in the cinema, 50th anniversary, it's being played everywhere, or B, you can get the chance to see it on a video somewhere, do it. It's a whole different experience. Everything about the film is original. It's probably the grimiest, hottest, dirtiest, sweatiest film you'll ever see this side of Amsterdam. And the thing with it as well is that it set the path for so many things that later came along. So you've got things like, you know, the final girl, you've got, you know, the cannibal family, you've got all of these things. The soundtrack itself is incredible. It is literally just industrial noise. The whole thing is an experience. That's all you can say about the film, actually. It isn't like going to the cinema, it's an experience. And it's one that you will never ever forget once you've witnessed it. So there you go, 1974, biggest and the best, Texas Chainsaw. What can I say to you? You'll run, you'll scream, just don't eat the barbecue.
Filmmaker Thomas Smith here with my horror recommendation, Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn. It's funny, it's scary, and it's just plain weird. And the filmmaking on display is peak Raimi. It's just always a blast to watch.